Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt and this is Cutting Through the Matrix on the 24th of June 2018. You know, this world is set up to cause maximum frustration for basically the ordinary people. Although some of the middle class folk too have to get up to the stage of getting a bit of frustration here and there too with basic everyday kind of things, but they've got more chance of having things done because we live in an awful snobbish system, don't we? It really does matter. It's always mattered, in fact, who you are in reality. And you'll find that reading history down through the ages to the present time, nothing really changes. People will kowtow to wealth and power. I remember talking before about a good book to do with, say, the Rockefellers, for instance. And it goes into the history of the Rockefellers when they had the militia open fire upon strikers at one time on behalf of the Rockefellers. And they killed people in their tent city and so on, workers and their families. And it didn't go too well, you see, for publicity and all that kind of thing. So philanthropists, the whole idea of philanthropy took an extra boost. It's always been around, usually used by crooks, but they took an extra step forward to get professionals in to manage the total makeover of a tyrant. And I make him sound like a kind of Father Christmas type person who really is worried about you all and just wants to help you. And of course the system that he belonged to, or old Rockefeller, is the same system that Carnegie and the rest of them had set up in advance, because going back to the days of Weishaupt even, they talked about using philanthropists to subvert nations by eventually making laws and running governments and advising them. And that's what you have today with the Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, etc. You have a parallel government. It's a real government. The ones that you think you elect are allowed to, say, argue with each other and pass the bills they're told to pass by the bosses. And we do have bosses. But the snobbery of society down through the ages, it really is quite something. And Britain was awfully good at it, where they would have basic rights. If for children, for instance, and women at one time, they'd really go overboard for corporations to help them out, rather than have a bad name like old Rockefeller got for shooting down miners and things. They go overboard occasionally to make a good impression. Sometimes, and today they make false ones. They'll get fake victims, and it's all prearranged, like actors and actresses. And look, we're helping so-and-so out, the poor soul. And you all think that's awfully nice of them to do that, so they get good public relations. But old Rockefeller, he got a guy called Gates, and he also got Mackenzie King from Canada in to do his total makeover. And they were well rewarded for doing that. And Mackenzie King was given Canada to be the front man off for a while as a prime minister. That's how things really are. That's how things really, really are. Nothing changes. And in the realms of power too, see, powerful people never grow up. Those who seek power, true psychopaths, never grow up. They take things awfully personally. And they want more power, always more power, more kowtowing by the masses, and more claim, etc. They've got to have it. They live on it. They chew it up. That's their food, because they're psychopaths. And psychopaths have tremendous egos. They love to talk about themselves, often in third person, and tell you how wonderful they are all the time, over and over and over. And now you have marketers in the act too, doing that for people to create images as well. So the system we're living in is very, very fake. It's it's beyond paper thin today, in fact, with its facade. But I used to think about all of this many, many years ago when you looked at the system. I call it the system. And the system truly has been here for an awful, awful long time. It's quite simple, really. You have powerful people with powerful institutions that live on regardless of the generation into which you're born. They recruit, train, and retire, and recruit, train, retire people all the time. And they can have their big goals there too for big changes for the future, which you live through right now too. Everything that's happening for change, it was planned a long before you were born, including the electronic systems as well. H.G. Wells worked for the big group too, not just the Fabian Society, because they're all Institute for International Affairs, and they're all society. He ran all that in those days. Because you must always run all sides of everything. And Quigley also talked about the same thing, but H.G. Wells talked about the world brain. And he said that everybody will have access to all information across the whole planet, will all be linked into it somehow. They just seemed to know it was coming. And with enough money, that struck one of their beliefs, with enough money and training put into any particular area, they can direct the course of change. And that's why you have discoveries today. And why those discoveries are bought over immediately and owned. And if folk won't sell them, they have accidents and things like that. That's how it really runs. Seriously. There's no conspiracy in this. Or conspiracy theory. This is truth. History is just nothing but conspiracies down through the ages. How do you think you had rebellions, for instance, in every country at different times? And rebellions, somebody didn't say, oh, I'm going to get a whole group together, train them to do this, and we'll all have a rebellion and overthrow whatever. No. They don't announce that. It's done in secrecy. And when two or more people gather together to overthrow a system that you're living into without the consent of the people, it's called a conspiracy. And that's one of the charges that's laid against them too. Conspiring to blah, blah, blah. Today, of course, it's meant to ridicule anybody who simply follows reality and who has an interest, for some strange reason, in knowing why things really do happen. Most folk don't. And most folk are quite well taken care of and happy with their entertainment and the reality that's given to them. They're quite happy. As long as they're not starving. I mean, as long as they've got enough cash to go off to the bars or take drugs or whatever it happens to be and have their internet and so on. They're quite happy, most people. And have their peer group to accept them. And they're even trained to have a peer group that'll accept them. Everything is so incredibly well managed in the system here. But today, I was wanting to just touch on basically the difference between some of the third world countries, which even the ones who are coming up into first world countries, it's kind of blurring the lines at times too, because many of the first world countries are going backwards as they finance what was called the third world countries through free trade, massive grants and loans and so on, and training, and in mass migration. It's all part of it as well. Planned that way, again, it doesn't happen by itself. And so all the changes are happening. This is the century of change, transition, they call it. When all of the old must be destroyed, all the old worlds, the old societies, the old nations, and even the peoples must be destroyed to bring in this new amalgamation and mix of, this is what they're hoping for in the near future. And well planned, as I say, and well written about, and mandated by every government. Most folk don't realise that too. They say, well, why is your own government mandating that you go down the tubes? Not that you would get an answer, but at least you should be asking the question. Shouldn't you? And if your elected government, if they're truly elected, that is, are literally in the business of just destroying you and your history and going back for hundreds and maybe thousands of years, isn't that treason? Of course it is. Well, why are they doing it? Who's given them permission? Nothing happens without planning. Nothing happens without big enterprises behind it all. And that's an awfully good term, to enterprise. You should look it up and see the history of that. It's always been involved in revolution. Always. Long before the US too, by the way. But this week I had some, again, experience of this system when things just don't work right. And as I say, it's a course in frustration, isn't it? Maximum frustration. Everything you buy is junk to start with. It isn't going to last very long. It's generally very expensive, especially in the electronic areas or the car areas. Everything's the same. It's meant to break down. A lot of parts are guaranteed to break down very quickly, especially when they put plastic parts inside engine compartments where there's high heat, along with little microchips and so on. Guaranteed, of course. And that's why they do it all. And you'll find too that anything you purchase, even small engines, are going to break down on you fairly quickly. You get all reasons why it's happening, and then you find out you're using awful gasoline because they put all the biofuel stuff in that's not really pure gasoline at all, and it turns back to gum, literally, in a carburetor, for instance, or in fuel jets, if you don't use it often enough and get rid of it. This is called progress. But it's a course in maximising frustration. Now, over the years, more so since I even did shows back in the late 90s and right through the present days, but I had never touched a computer then, up until about 2005 or 6. I hated them. I knew what they were for, and that's why I wanted nothing to do with them. And I had vowed I would not spend my life learning this, and it's a constant learning exercise as to keep changing this and changing that. Of course it is. It's meant to have you stuck there on your rear end, sitting there playing with it forever, trying to fix things and so on. It's a joke. Well planned, mind you, but that's what your masters want. And they monitor you too. And I knew too that from the very beginning they should be giving the computers and everything else for free, since it's mainly for their benefit at the very top, to constantly analyse you, put in you and pigeonhole you with your whole personality profiles and your likes, dislikes, and all the rest of the stuff that they do on you. They've got you down pat completely, perfectly. And now they boast about it with the articles and so on, just how pat they have it. And you can't help them boasting because they're right to an extent. The public are just too willing to throw all their information up there all the time, daily. Even when they're changing their minds about things or opinions, they let your unseen masters know about it immediately. It's really interesting to see it in operation. But with the maximising my frustration, as I say, when things just go wrong or wonky or whatever. And this week and the week before, I had problems with, for instance, internet just starting to conk out. And I have to use satellite just for internet only. At well over 100, it's 110 or something, I think, a month for the privilege, as you say in Canada, the privilege of being able to use the thing during the day on a minimal level, because you can't do much on it during the day unless it's just basic text. You only download something heavier in the middle of the night, maybe after 2 a.m. till I think 7 or 8 a.m. in the morning. And that's your privilege there for $110 for a month. And with all the shows I was doing for forever too, I had a standby as well. Tellus it was called. It's really a Huey little pod thing that connects to the tower, a near tower, and it's amazing. It really hasn't changed at all in my area. Because remember, we're on Agenda 21 too, and Jack's Tally said the same thing, that we'd winners and losers in the New World Order, yada yada, and then his next book went into the fact that winners will be people with the maximum high-speed internet. Rural areas will be selected, of course. It depends how upper middle class you are. If you're in the right upper middle class area, you'll get all the benefit stuff. But if you're not, you'll just be paying for all through your taxes, but you won't get the service, really. And that's what's really been ticking me off for the last week or so. So the standby one, because sometimes the satellite would go off and out, it would be Tellus I had to use in this area. And for the privilege of using that for 6 gigabytes, which is probably an update on the modern 10s, for instance, Windows 10, if you're using that. Understand you can't switch them off now, they just keep updating themselves and all the apps as well. That'd probably be, you might get 6 gigs in a day, and that's it's done in a day. $70 plus tax. That's the privilege for you getting 6 gigabytes in Ontario here where I am. But if I went up to 12 gigabytes, which is the maximum they're going to give you, I'd have to pay 100 plus tax. There you go. This is the great first world country of Canada that's throwing out $400 million packages across the world and throwing millions of dollars at electronic car systems for private corporations. It's called fascism. And at the same time, Tellus, for instance, I believe has got pilot projects out west. Because the government of Canada gave all these companies, these companies that have got the same kind of system, I think 400 million. Why 400 million is the favourite number this last few months, I don't know. For giving to train women across the world, giving education, or to the high-tech industry, another $400 million to do pilot projects across, for instance, British Columbia. Again, into the especially wealthier areas. It's supposed to be allocated for rural areas like where I am, but nope. Let's put it into the wealthier folks, the ones who have the clout and the voting, etc. So we get ripped off mightily here in Canada, ripped off incredibly, as we're paying other third world countries to have higher internet speeds than we have, and coverage as well. So there you go. That's your beautiful system in Canada. And I had to get in contact with them this week because, you see, TELUS, with their grants that they've been getting and all that, are advertising something across Alberta and British Columbia for 50 gigabytes for 60 a month. Now that's heaven for here, for Canada. Or they can have 250 gigabytes for 75 a month. But here in Ontario, for the same price, I can only get 6 gigabytes. And I had this out on the phone with these characters this week. And you talk about playing with you, because that's what they have for these companies. They all hire people who are really psychopath, lower level psychopath. They sit there and they pat you on the head. Oh, they're there, as they play and laugh at you. And that's what they honestly do. And that's what I got the runaround. Quite amazing. They get the runaround and understand, too, they're awfully abusive. To even female customers, I got that firsthand from someone. Terribly abusive, because they're coming from other countries to get hired where they really don't respect women very much at all. Quite something, eh? But anyway, for myself, my own experience was I got the runaround with these guys. But again, very nicely, because before you know it, you're almost apologizing to them. That's what, if you were stupid enough, that's how they can play you so well, these little lower-level psychopaths. Standard psychopathy. Rather than just tell you the basic facts up front, yeah, well, we've chosen wealthier areas, even though they're getting massive grants of my tax money to put into rural areas. They're not doing it over here. But they'll do it in the wealthier areas, you see. And the test, and guess who most of the ones who are getting it too, or were a couple of years ago for the high speed, their own workers, using our tax money, eh? They can give the services to their own workers. Isn't that wonderful? Then other companies too are all joining in and getting their test beds here and there and all, but not here, even though it's designated for rural areas. Isn't that wonderful? But really, and we're throwing money across the world as well, as I say. For the privilege of 12 gigabytes, this company want $100 plus tax from me. Isn't that wonderful? And as I say, with the modern computers, not that I have that, but if I did have one, it'd be updating itself immediately overnight, and that'd be your 6 gigabytes gone right away. So if I lived in a posher area, I suppose it would be different, because that's where they're putting it all in right now. Then Bell Canada had problems with them during the week as well. My phone was going in and out. This happens every year or two since I've been here, because the lines are rotting. And they won't replace them, naturally, because they want everybody to be on cell phones for their wonderful high gigabyte per month and so on. So they swap me between two. It always breaks generally in different places on the way down to the house, but generally too is at the little junction house they have, or a block they call it, up in the local little village. And they swap me from one set of 2 wires to the other set of 2 wires, back and forth for over years actually. And then I get hums on it and so on. And at one point I was getting the phantom 911 calls coming from here, supposedly. And it's something that happens when your lines start crossing, when there's a short in their system. And the cops will come at 1 or 2 in the morning. Dangerous thing in the country, it's pitch black at night. And there's no flashing lights or anything. And the first thing you think is a home invasion. So dangerous. This is a third world country now. That's where it's going into. I really mean it. And I really mean that. And folk who are rolling in the cash, yeah, you'll be living a bit better than me. And you won't be living in the conditions I live in. And you have, again, you probably belong to different institutions or even different lodges or whatever it happens to be. Then you get special favours, etc. But for me, no. This is the most, we're living in an awful, awful class-ridden, racist society. And I mean racist too. Because on the phones, they're hiring outside the countries as well, for some countries, to do anything to do with telecom. And you'll hear the abuse occasionally, coming across from other countries that you're giving money to. And you're supposed to put up with this. Why? Well, you see, the reason a lot of countries have been third world countries is because they don't have civility amongst their populations, civility to each other. They have never gone through that system. They've never gone through a unified cultural system where you do treat people properly. It doesn't matter who they are. And our systems where even life at one time, up until recently, was valued, highly valued, and everybody mattered. And that these countries have never gone through that. These countries often were very, very rich, and the masses of tremendously poor. That's why you call it a third world country. But we're all going into this wonderful system. Because a system that rules over all of us today and brought us to where we are now is bringing us to the next phase where we're getting flattened across the world into the same system. You saw it in ancient times too. Wherever the ultra wealthy rich lived, you had the home of commerce in some big cities. And the big cities, you'd have the most powerful, wealthiest folk on the planet, even in ancient Egypt. And cities in India, etc. Surrounded by masses of poverty, prostitution, deviancies of all kind, and starvation outside of it. All coexisting together as though it's normal. And that was never allowed to be normal. Never allowed to be normal in certain countries that were classed up until the 20th century as first world countries. Because you had to treat everybody, whether you liked it or not. Because nobody's always there. Because that was the culture. And we're losing it all so quickly. Incredibly quickly. And with big corporations, they're so arrogant now. Because they haven't had the massive input and the massive lawsuits coming in, which will have to start big time to get the ball rolling, or else you lose it all, because they're treating people like peasants already, honestly. And you have to start standing up for yourselves and putting them back to your inner place. And you don't want just a simple there pat on the head. No, you want something done about your complaint. Because you see, you're supposed to be the customer. And if you're a taxpayer, and says these characters are all living off your tax money, every corporation out there in the corporate welfare system, then you are technically their boss as well. And it's time you start to remind them of it. Because if you don't, you've all had it. You are being put down into this third world system with ultra-rich folk, a minority ruling over you all, and massive, disgusting dehumanization of the humanity itself, the very essence of civilization and humanity. And when that goes, horror is there. Horror. And that's what they've been depicting in the dystopian movies for the last 20 years, the sci-fi movies. And back when they started, you say, well, that would never happen here. Oh, yeah, well, here it is. You can see it every day in the papers. Look at England today, folks. Massive murders every day. Every single day. Slaughtering. Gangs, many of them were brought into the country from so-called third world countries. And they don't suddenly become civilized. It doesn't happen. Even if they're raised from the youth, a lot of them want to go right into tribal systems. There's a father this week who's got a couple of young children, and the children's bikes had been stolen. School children pass their homes every day, going in and out of school. And the CCTV cameras had found out who it was, I think, and the guy went out to challenge them one day. And the gang surrounded them, and they beat him to death with a cricket bat and walked away. This is something, at one time you'd read about the third world countries. Well, guess what? Britain is that system now. Of course it is. You have the have-nots, and then you have the minority of haves. You got a middle class that will last a little while longer, but eventually that will start getting flattened out and dying off too. It's all been dying off for a while. And you'll be back like ancient Egypt before you know it. Same system. And massive prostitution. You already have that everywhere too. Young kids getting dragged into it and drugged and so on, as you know. Not just in Britain, you have it in Canada as well. I was checking out the papers just about last week or two. I couldn't believe the same stories. Same stories. You could swap the photographs, everything, and the stories, and the drug gangs, etc., etc. But that's the mandate, isn't it? Obviously. Your masters who rule the world, who all agree on everything. And that's the key to it. It's this agreement, this pledge. They all must pledge to go on the same agenda. All what you think are your elected leaders, and you watch it happen. And they'll all stand up for each other, but they'll never tell the public the truth. You don't have a democracy. You never have had it. And it's in your face today as never before. Never, ever before. But see, with the corporations now, they're your feudal overlords, as Quigley said they would be. The arrogance, even from their lowly little psychopathic marketing and PR departments and complaints departments. And they don't call it complaints departments now, they call it escalating it into the next phase of resolution. It sounds better than a complaints department, which means they won't admit they have any complaints at all. It's all psychology. Arrogant characters using, and as I say, our tax money funds them all. That's the true meaning of fascism. It's corporations totally in bed with your politicians who use your tax money to fund them. And they make a system where they make it almost impossible to live without computers or cell phones. And that's the agenda, and they're going the whole way with it now. Every agency that works for governments and many other agencies depend on getting your daily data update on you. As I say, they should give you all for nothing. Really, it's a prison, folks. It's a prison. And one day, you only find out about it when they aren't content to just sit back quietly accumulating all your data. They're already starting to make their moves now, aren't they? With certain people. They're going after them. It's going to get a lot worse. This is a tyrannical system, and I hope you understand it. But it's very much like the old stories that came out of India with the different snake charmers and so on. You'd see in markets, and you would see them charm the snake, and it would come up there, and it would go back and forth with, in the movies at least, then watching the flute and kind of weave back and forth towards the flute, etc. That's how they always portrayed it in the movies. And the idea was too, it was also hypnotizing you, the onlooker, by the snake's movements. And that's where we've been going this way for an awful long time. Being enchanted by a system that charms us and gives you all these, oh, this is wonderful, oh, look at these wonderful pictures, oh, look at blah, 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 blah. Until your life is consumed and taken over by a fake reality, very carefully constructed, but fake nonetheless. You have no friends out there on your Facebooks and so on. Your friends have to meet you, shake your hand, and sit and chat to you. That's a friend. I've done so many stories over the years on the fake friends, the sock puppets, as they call them, computer generated. And you can send off questions, they'll send you back answers, it's all computer generated. And then keep you going forever, including argumentative ones too. You have no idea how intense all of this is. But as I say, it should all be free, and they should be giving you all the equipment because they want you to spend your life and be addicted to this. It's just as addictive, if not more so, than cocaine and heroin. It certainly is. And it's been promoted as a great thing for your rulers. They know for your profile how you'll react in every single situation. They run simulations on your profile. Your little virtual reality, you. And you don't even know that. Anyway, so you can't make people do things when they are enchanted. They have to break away themselves if they so desire, or hope that they've got a spark in there that wants it. But getting back to the frustrations of modern life, as you go through the phone not working and then your internet even come on and off and so on, and getting charged so much money for poor service, and then discriminatory policies where the wealthier folk get all the benefits, and the folk that's meant to do for using their tax money in rural areas don't get anything at all. Isn't that wonderful? And they have no intention of giving us the better speeds in this area here. Even though the high-speed internet fibre optics go through us there, it's all brand new cables, but they ain't going to put it in to give it to the public here. They don't branch it off for the public, although they have a branch, I found out, in the local little Bell office for telephone up there, but they're not going to connect it. And so, like Jack's Italia said, they'll simply, you'll have to move out to the area and move into the big cities, like Agenda 21 says, of course. And that is the agenda. And everything is so frustrating, isn't it? And the wealthy get given all the freebies and benefits and all that, and the folk is really intended for, which is really rural, not like Orangeville further south, but the places that are really rural don't get it at all. You get paid through the nose for a measly 12 gigabytes for $100 plus tax a month. Wonderfully. We pretend we're first world countries. You see, in a third world country, that's what you'd see there, where the wealthier get everything. But they'll use all the taxes of everybody to make the wealthy get everything. Same as here. Nothing changes, eh? Nothing at all. Quite something. So I'll put some links to this too to let you know how it kind of is happening in Canada. For those who care, it's the same across the States as well. And the States have got a bit more I call complainability in the States, because folk tend to complain more when they should, of course. Up here in Canada, they don't. They're very quiet. And, oh, well, they roll over and get shafted. And one of them is this 5G wireless telecommunications write-up. Everyone is Canadian. Telecoms won't commit to any dates for 5G networks. Again, for those out in Alberta and British Columbia, internet speed and connectivity in rural Alberta, it says. So they're testing it all out there and giving them all these great deals. It costs less than a cup of coffee a month per household for a backhaul, it says. Fibre network and so on, but they also give them massive rural connectivity, which I'm not going to get here. But I'm paying for theirs from the federal government. Wonderfully. It says all of Alberta's 400 rural communities rely on SuperNet for choice, it says. So there you go. Isn't that wonderful? And it gives you an idea how it works. And also, CNW, Huawei enables, it says Bell Cars wireless to the home with trials that put Canadian rural customers on the path to 5G. Once again, taxpayers' money gets thrown into it like you wouldn't believe. And they're all... And of course, they'll drag it on until they get more and more money thrown at them by government. This is how fascism really works, folks, for those corporate fascists. If you don't understand this, you'll never understand anything, honestly. In any country, you'll never understand it at all. In big business, don't think small if you want to get rich. And say, I'll start at the bottom and work my way up. No, you've got to start way up there and get massive grants to either start up electric car companies or whatever it happens, and all paid by the taxpayer pretty well. That's how you do things. That's how you do it. But as I say, it's interesting to see what they're giving other people. But I've got the privilege of 6 gigabytes. Isn't that wonderful? By TELUS Canada. And I can get my head patted by somebody that can hardly speak the language, who will keep you going and pat you on the head. Oh, there, and make clucking sounds, etc. Give you a bit of hope and then dash it at the end of wasting your time for an hour. That's what they do. They're trained to do that. At least I knew it. You do also have to think about this technology with their very explosive batteries they're putting out everywhere too. Here's another article. There's so many of articles out there on cars catching fire, these electronic cars. And you've got Tesla car catches fire out of the blue in California traffic. Another one is too. And it says it caught fire apparently out of the blue while sitting in a California traffic. And the video of the incident has been shared by US actress Mary McCormack, whose husband was in the electric car at the time. So her husband was in traffic in Santa Monica Boulevard when the vehicle suddenly caught fire. There was no accident to cause it, and the blaze came completely out of the blue, she said. Now they have this super thermal thing they talk about too that happens with these batteries, and you don't generally you don't have any chance at all. It just explodes pretty well. Passers-by flagged down the driver, who then got out of the vehicle, and the video recorded the scene showing flames shooting out from underneath the car, the parked car. It didn't have an autopilot either, which was one of the excuses they've given before for it, but it had nothing to do with that either. So it didn't have that kind of feature in it. So, and as the batteries, they're just darn well dangerous. It happens all the time with these things. And you pay an awful lot of money for these batteries. Was it 40-odd thousand to replace them when they don't recharge much anymore? They're not meant to last. It's another big racket con, just like the same with biofuel. Let's make it out of vegetables and grow less vegetables and corn and all the rest of it. Just get out of there. And of course, then folk have to pay more and more money for the food they can find. It's a way of putting the prices up for agriculture. Everything's a racket, folks, out there. Everything. And then you have a Brit-educated tech boss who died after his mobile phone exploded as he slept next to it. You got to see the pictures on this thing. It's scary. I mean, this wasn't just a wee fire here. The thing exploded like a bomb. And the complete bed and everything is totally black and charred, gone. Amazing. This is from a cell phone getting charged, apparently. And the dad of 3 who studied at University of Buckingham, it's an odd university type. I think Maggie Thatcher is one of her grants set up that system there. It's not even a really a paid place either. It's a special, I don't know, it's privileges to get there somehow. And I think King's College London also works with it too. Was the chief of the Malaysia-based Cradle Fund. It must be for bringing in people from outside to train them there. Anyway, it says that the post-mortem showed the businessman was killed due to blast injuries. Blast injuries from the phone. Huh? So it's not... you'll be so careful with these things, folks, and you almost have to get some kind of fireproof box. There's another big market, I'm sure, for them, to charge them in so they won't explode on you. Mind you, they might explode when you take it out. Who knows? I don't know. But again, they should be giving you all these things for free because the governments are keeping all the data, every call you make, every text you do, everything is for them and the agencies. Because you see, you're owned. You're owned as much as a farmer owns his cattle. And a farmer knows everything about every cow and every bull that he's got. He knows everything, the genealogy and everything, the same as us. Hmm? And that way they're very predictable. Even when they mate with so-and-so and so-and-so's cows, they know their genealogies. They'll know a good idea how their health will be, anything they're going to be prone to, they know, and what their temperament's going to be, and how much the beef they'll produce, or else how much the milk they'll produce on a daily basis. It's the same thing with us. We get milked all the time. And the beauty of it is they make you think it's all your choices and it's your fun. You're all having fun. Now they have a whole slew of new illnesses to do with mental illness and cell phones and addictions to it and so on. So yeah, be careful with these phones and these. I wouldn't drive these electric cars. Personally myself, no way. No way. There was some money went into some big make car. It was one of the well-known makes, a big one. And I think you can only go 24 miles before the batteries are flat. Well, that's no use. That'd be even flatter in the winter where I live in Canada. Much quicker because cold destroys the charge. Dissipates it too. And that's the way it is. That's really the way it is. But say we're going into third world countries, and look at too how they've trained people very recently, really, within the last year or two, not to expect real news anymore. All they have is junk news. All the papers use the same stories now, the same pictures. Oh, send us your pictures, and they'll publish some junk story, little video clips or whatever. But there's no real news. so that you don't get involved in what your governments are up to, what laws are coming up for debate, etc. You're out of the picture. You can't complain if you don't know about it. Isn't it clever, eh? But you got all these other things. Oh, let's look at the stars. Oh, their divorces. Oh, my God. That's not news, folks. That's gossip. That's trivia gossip. But they're training the people that is news, you see. And you can spend the whole day wasting your time looking at photograph after photograph in some of the papers now. That's not news. Also, as you go into the third world status, and the war has been on for a long time, openly actually, from countries that really bring in people from all over the world. More so now than ever. But for years we've been doing this, and being decent to them, helping them get on their feet and so on, using taxpayers' money again, blah, 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 blah. And now you find out the next step is drive to rid schools of dead white men, like Shakespeare. Will leave children at the mercy of fads and fashions. Jenny Agutter says, she's an actress for years in Britain. It's in your face today. The drive to rid schools of dead white men, like Shakespeare, will leave children at the mercy of fads and fashions. The veteran actress urged teachers not to remove literary traits from school curricula on spurious grounds. Don't remove someone who's dead and white just because they're dead and white, she told the Telegraph. That is pigeonholing and shouldn't be allowed. There are French writers who are dead, there are Greek writers, there are all sorts of people who are dead, but one doesn't want to put them in that category. Oh, so why did they want to put English speaking in that category? Well, maybe your farmers who own you have decided so. My feeling is that the best writing across its time and social backgrounds, no one should be classified as black, white, dead or alive if their writing is good. What's important for children to learn about writers from different backgrounds and countries, and however must not lose our literary heritage, she said. She's a patron of the Shakespeare Schools Foundation charity. This is something that's currently fashionable, may easily go out of fashion, which is why you need to stick to some of the things that remain with us and part of who we are. Apart from anything else, modern writers reference history, modern artists reference history, and the periods before. You can't reference things, she said. We don't just belong in our own time, we belong at the end of a whole string of things. Isn't that the truth? That's your culture and your history and who you are. And classical writing, it can't go out of fashion because it's so intense with its meanings and how it conveys meanings through vocabulary, proper vocabulary. And you actually, I think the Shakespearean guys, that particular era, they knew Greek history, Roman history, European histories, different countries. They knew mythologies, they knew religion, they knew everything, and they could cram it all so well into their writings, including all the Machiavellian type of power play that we see today on a daily basis. That was down pat, so perfectly portrayed in the characters that they showed you in the plays. If you forget that, you're done for, because that's really one of the best areas for learning about human nature. It truly is. And it's being done away with, of course, because there are big agendas afoot to destroy your cultures and your people, even your memories of it, as they bring you into third world countries and flatten out the nations. Again, back to the big tall tower of Egypt, incredible wealth and power, poverty down below, begging, prostitution, child prostitution, everything. The same system over and over again. Always remember that. Or we're done for. We're pretty well done for anyway, I think, but you always have a little bit of hope there. For someone here and there. For the last few generations, there's only an occasional few that really carry real knowledge on to the next group, to tell them and show them what's happened before. Not just the stuff they show you and you get taught, and the petty stuff that's always changing, but through political correctness in universities, but the true things that have happened, the true things. Do you understand the amount of people who've died off in your lifetime? Everyone should remember this. People who lived through big events, not the post death, basically, of their systems, the death systems of history that are given in the history books. I mean, 9/11 pretty well, the dust hadn't cleared before they were churning out books to go along with the official version, which makes no sense at all. But folk who lived through the real things, even the Great War, World War I and then World War II, and so on. And the true state of affairs in austerity, Britain, for instance, and other parts of Europe, are dying off and going away. And they had so much that they fought for and stand up for to get some rights back, because so many rights were taken from them in World War II. Many of them never were given back. And through anti-terrorism and so on, it's not intended you ever go back to having real rights again. I hope you understand that. Just the opposite. So I put these links up I always put these links up for folk to read if they want to read them. And another one too is to do with Japan suspends sale of Canadian wheat over discovery of Monsanto-made GMO. And they're not happy at all. It says the suspended is tender on sale of wheat from Canada Friday. Comes as grain containing genetically modified trait was discovered last summer in Canada's Alberta province, it says. Even though they're not supposed to be doing it in Canada. Of course they're doing it in Canada. Canada was giving this stuff to the public for 10 years before it broke out from Britain, actually, that we were the guinea pigs for it all. They never told us here. And they weren't going to, and then when they did publish it, when it came out from Britain, it says it was a secret deal made by the Canadian government and Monsanto at the time. Can you believe that? You're electing these creeps that decide to poison you like test rats and study you the health effects on you. Not that they're going to go along with the results and say, well, it's because believe you me, it was already decided if it's bad for you, you're going to get it anyway. Of course it is. That's how it's done. Anyway, Japan's done the right thing. And don't forget, of course, that Monsanto now is under another company taken over. Ties in with Bayer to ditch Monsanto name after the mega merger. I'll put that up as well for those who want it. Interesting thing too, you think about conspiracies down through the ages, etc. And how the CIA and others will poo-poo folk who talk about conspiracy. Now, there are some ones out there that are definitely fake, who are put out there to ridicule facts to do with conspiracy theory. And they go so far overboard that you're left getting laughed at along with them. That's the intention of that's counterintelligence. That's what they do. But here you have an article here, for instance, that shows you it's just not unusual at all. We know that, for instance, the US at one time had an agenda or a plan in place to get an excuse to attack Cuba by shooting down one of its own aircraft, its own jetliner, its American liner, blaming it on them and getting the war going. That's not unusual. Here's Israel plan to shoot down passenger jet that Arafat at the time was in. It's an assassination plot, it says, and it's in a new book. It says the plan to assassinate Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat included a plot to blow up a passenger plane and a football stadium. There you go. According to an explosive new book by Israeli investigative journalist Ronan Bergman. It's published, extensive revelations published in Rise and Kill First, it's called, which is the policy of Israel, is kill first. The secret history of Israel Israel's targeted killings. And it says, the New York Times published an extract from the files and so on, or the book, Tuesday. It goes into the plan to shoot down a plane with different passengers in it just to get Arafat. It looks better that way. They can always blame it on something else or say, well, it was a mishap and no one would do that just to get one person. But of course, that's why it works so well. Yes, they do these kind of things to get one person or to get other agendas put forth too. Think about that. Think about that. And it says, although the plan was eventually called off, it was allegedly one of the list of plans to assassinate the Palestinian leader. And it's a hidden history, surprising even in the context of Israel's already fierce reputation, because Israel's gotten the highest reputations for killing folk across the world, it says in the same book too. They even had a plane that was carrying, I think it was Arafat's brother. They thought it was Arafat at the time. So according to the book Summit, which is the Mossad unit which recruits assets overseas, had heard Arafat would take a plane from Athens to Cairo. Caesarea, the Mossad unit responsible for targeted killings, sent 2 operatives to war at Athens airport. F-15 fighters were placed on alert. Mossad eventually realized that the man was not Arafat, but his brother, who was bringing wounded Palestinian children to Cairo for medical treatment. So because of the bad PR it would cause anyway, never mind, the fact it was his brother, they called it off. There you go. But they also had trained a Manchurian candidate to go out and assassinate people. However, as soon as he released it, the guy who had indoctrinated, he went into a police station and explained everything and blew the plan. And they were going to set up bombs inside a Beirut stadium as well. So there you go. There's no one nice in these whole agendas. There's, really, honestly, the people who are recruited for these agendas, for making wars across the world, slaughtering people, are really ultimate vital psychopaths. Working for their bosses who are also incredible psychopaths. People who want power are psychopaths. They always say that those who are thrust upon, or have power thrust upon them in times of crisis generally don't want the power in the first place. And they leave it as soon as their job is over. But these characters just go on forever, deceiving the world. Remember, it isn't just a deception to get enemies out of the way. It's deception to fool your own peoples or other nations that you want to use as tools even. That's how it works, folks. I hope you understand that. Most propaganda you're hearing on a daily basis inside your own countries. Although it could be other countries running what you're hearing inside your own country. Another article is ramping up Russia threat manna from heaven for the UK arms industry. Good article too. And it's true, they're all laughing and enjoying themselves as the tax money is thrown across the world to the big corporations whose business is war, isn't it? And high-tech war is great because it's so expensive for everything. Another article too I want to put up tonight is that Facebook has been criticized for hiding an advertising product that claims to be able to predict users' future behaviors and targets messages at them in an attempt to alter those behaviors. Don't ever forget that. You're being manipulated, your mind is being altered for your bosses. And you'll come to the conclusions think it's your own choices. No, it's not. The product is called Loyalty Predictions by Facebook, part of a suite of capabilities enabled by a machine learning power tool called FB Learner Flow. It's almost like FBI, isn't it? FB Learner Flow. The tool was publicly introduced in 2016, but the advertising techniques it enables were only revealed in a pitch document leaked to The Intercept. So they have the ability to use vast amounts of personal data to identify individual users who are at risk of changing to competitors' products. That's also to do with politics too, remember? And then target them with advertising at the moment they would be about to switch. And they get you totally sussed out perfectly, folks. And you are not you anymore. You're a predictable machine yourself. Washington, D.C., the psychopath capital of America. Good article as well. I'll put that up. And it tells you about, again, the power of mad, crazy people too. And the techniques that they use and the traits that they all have is quite interesting. They have an awfully grandiose way of thinking about themselves, and DC has numerous means of seeking and attaining power. And it says the television critics who dismissed the Netflix House of Cards as cartoonish and unrealistic, surely nobody could be that villainous, may have a few apologies to make. The pretense of psychopaths in the District of Columbia is consistent with the conjecture that psychopaths are likely to be effective in the political sphere. Murphy writes in the paper. Good article, actually, it's a long article. Well worth reading. And I'll also put up this article here to do with, well, more psychopathy in a way too. And you might even understand, even relate to certain people who can't help boasting about themselves, which is another trait a lot of them have as well. Other ones are a bit more clever and will listen to the coaching they'll get from handlers, you know. Others, but certain ones can't do it because they're so grandiose with what they believe themselves to be, which is way superior to you. And that's really how it is, isn't it? But as I say, we're going into, and we're really pretty on the verge of the big psychopathic system run and led system of incredible riches and multi-leveled strata of classes, in a sense. With the very, very ones at the top, very, very, very rich ones and powerful ones. And again, money really gives you the power. People will grovel to you. It's rather sad, isn't it? Like the one about Rockefeller, when he was brought round the miners' homes, when they remade him total makeover, but being a great philanthropist and concerned about them and all. And the writer of the particular book on Rockefeller said that. It says, like always happens in the presence of very rich and powerful people, the working people just grovel and doff their hats and almost kneel to them. And that's a sad trait with humanity. It's like kings, you see. That's how the peasants were with kings as well. Sad. It's terribly sad that. To debase and demean yourself by groveling to anybody. It's terrible, that. Terrible. But again, we're living in a financial system that promotes all of that. Winners and losers in the New World Order, the coming New World Order, as Attali said. And he worked at the United Nations, and he was a big businessman himself, and he had connections to really, actually a lot of personal connections, maybe even family connections to those who are in the hierarchy of designing it all for the next 100-odd years. That's how it is. We know who's who, we know what's what, and we know what you can't say. And we're living in a time, it's becoming dangerous to even know things to an extent, because if you do know certain things, the time is coming where you couldn't even think them openly on the internet. I mean, think them. Seriously. Because everything you're doing is profiling you, everything you're doing. You cannot avoid the data collection. You can maybe cut it down with certain private companies and stuff as far as what they can get a hold of, but the big boys at the top, no way at all. It's wide open for them to have access to everything. And nothing's to be sold to the public that they can't get access to. That's a law. So you're in a system, a very, very ancient system, that rules with money, with the power to create money, and to eliminate any competition of the same thing called money. And it runs, of course, everything underneath it, from the capstone all the way down to the barren earth down below, the sparse, the brush, as they always show you around the pyramid, the brush at the bottom, which is the scum of the earth. That's what it represents, the peasantry. And the layers of bricks beneath it represent the strata of society, all the way up to a ruling elite on behalf of the rulers, the true rulers. And the capstone, of course, happens to represent the true rulers of the world. They don't do work as such. They just own it all. And professors and the rest of them and experts do all the work on their behalf for them. Old system, ancient. It had setbacks in some countries as gains were made in the early 20s, late 1900s into early 2000s. And you've watched them all get taken away from you in the latter part of the 20th century. Of course, world wars didn't help either, but that was part of the plan as well. And as H.G. Wells said, he says, we need more wars to make the people come to their knees, give up their sovereignty, and allow themselves to be mastered, basically, and ruled. From myself, Alan Waterman, Ontario, Canada. I'll put this up on my privileged internet system, which I have to pay for, big money, so that the wealthier folk who get grants, use my grants for my tax money, can get better internet speed across Canada that was meant for rural areas, but it's not being used for the rural areas, certainly not in Ontario. It's good night, and may your God or your gods go with you.